Welcome, my friends. I just did my second interview since arriving in the Middle East, and it was absolutely fantastic. Michelle is a friend of mine. We were able to dive into some subjects that I think are going to be quite illuminating for you, and her story of healing is really quite remarkable. But until we get to that, if you are unaware, I am going to be teaching an absolutely revolutionary course on sacred energy exchange, sex. I'm going to be discussing things like pornography, masturbation, the things that we are normally not comfortable talking about. I want to give you the enlightened perspective, the metaphysical perspective about what is really going on when we engage in sex, what it can be applied for, all the different applications of really the most powerful force that exists. So that is going to be pinned at the top of the comments below. So if you want to learn more about sex and ways and things that you've never heard before, sign up. That class is going to start towards the end of November. But until then, enjoy this great interview that I did with Michelle. I'll see you soon.
I feel like in a way I've almost been waiting for this since I read Supercharged Self-Healing last year.
Mm. You enjoy
Um
that?
yeah, I mean it came at a I had already been really super chronically ill for about 10 years, and
Mm.
I was still in pretty bad shape when I read it, but some a friend recommended it and I was like, all right, yeah, sure. But when you're in that situation, you're like, sure, another book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I read it, and it was just, it was really just one line that stood out when you were like, the reason why mystics fast and meditate is because it works. And I thought, well, that's simple. It's that's clear. And so
Yeah.
I embarked on a 61-day juice fast,
Mm.
which really just absolutely kind of changed my entire physiology.
I bet. I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty massive. So it was when I started this, I thought I need to talk to him, and it's just all of your other philosophies too. But that was just what was personal for me.
Oh, I'm glad. Well, I'm glad you. That takes a lot of determination and will to do that. But I mean, nothing happens without determination and will. So I would say you were utilizing it properly for sure. Congratulations on doing that because that does take a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, it was especially standing up at the juicer and like actually taking these pounds and pounds and pounds of vegetables and cutting them up and like kind of falling over. It was about a week or two until I started to get the nutrition and the sort of strength from the enzymes. First, couple of weeks were definitely a challenge, but after that, it was like when you start to see results, you're like, okay, yeah, sure. Who needs food?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's absolutely true. I mean, that statement about why do mystics and masters always talk about meditation and fasting because they work. It's one of the fasting fasting in all its forms, right? So we when we say fasting, of course, the first thing we think of is food, right? But that is because we associate or identify ourselves with our physical form. So if if we started fasting, just in general, fasting from the things that we're normally inundating ourselves with, we would see tremendous results. But I feel that the food, and I don't know if I can't remember because that was the first book, but uh, I remember certainly at least feeling and stating, whether I stated it in Supercharged or not, but I always thought food was the foundation of the so-called matrix. That everything that's kind of like the basement, and everything is built on top of this foundation of food, identification with physical form. And once we actually develop the detachment and the will to fast, whether it's juice fasting or fasting from everything but maybe water, and then there's even dry fasting, which is a whole other level. Which people have to be careful with that. Um, everything the false self, and I always say healing is the deconstruction of the false self. That kind of like what's that game, Jenga? You pull
Yeah.
yeah. So with fasting, it's kind of like the deconstruction of the false self has begun. And I've always found that might be the single most important thing that we can do. Not everyone can fast though. If we are severely underweight, maybe from illness or or from something, not everyone can fast, but they can fast in other ways. They can fast in other ways, but it's so effective that people actually can't really believe how effective fasting really is. And fasting to me also is like it's kind of what meditation is, right? You're fasting from phenomena, you're fasting from thoughts, you're fasting from identifications with bodily sensations, you're fasting. And really, when you start to do that, you begin to feast on the self. And when you feast on the self, that will really reverse, repair, rejuvenate, and regenerate anything that's out of whack with the so-called physical body and even the subtle bodies of energy. Fasting is the key.
Here's a question, because coming from the situation I was in, it was like that fast. There's this like holy grail in the I say chronic illness world, where you're trying to get something called mucoid plaque out of your colon. And it's kind of like a rubbery tar-like substance that lines the colon. And often people who are chronically ill, especially things like Lyme, there's pathogens that hide behind the substance. So when you remove it from your body, suddenly the body can start doing what it's supposed to do. And I noticed after that started coming out that my mind opened up
Mm,
to the, I guess, my calling in a way.
mm.
My message, it's when I finished my book, and it's when I started to have dreams of like, maybe I'll do a podcast one day. But what I also noticed in myself and other people, that certain illnesses that are somewhat neurological, like in my case, it was a vaccine injury and it sort of broke the limbic system. So my autonomic nervous system doesn't really hadn't been working as well, and that requires more of what you talk about. It requires almost brain. There are programs called brain rewiring. There's Joe Dispenza. There's your program. I'm wondering, why is sometimes food enough, and sometimes you have to go deeper into the kind of work that you did, especially on yourself?
Oh, well, that's a great question. Okay. Well, the first thing I would say is that it's always deeper than food. So, in other words, there's already a shift in self-awareness and perception in order to take different actions. So, the different actions that we might be taking, say it's fasting or carnivore or whatever, it doesn't really matter. We're taking a different action, but what led up to the action? So there is already a shift in consciousness. There's already a shift in perception. There's already a shift in level of self-awareness. And then there are actions being taken. So if we go to that beginning part, Michelle, that's really the key. So it's never really, we think it's, and there's efficacy in these things that we're talking about without question. But we always think it's about the fasting, which has great efficacy, or it's about switching to carnivore, or it's about switching to juice, or it's about something, right? Um, and that does, like I said, there is efficacy, sometimes great efficacy in those things, but it starts before that. And the key is the start before that. It's the shift in perception. It's the shift in understanding. It's the shift in self-awareness. That shift is what leads to a different action. And the real key is that inner shift in perception, that inner shift in self-awareness. The actions that we take, while they do have efficacy, they absolutely do, in a lot of ways, on deep, deep levels, they're just permission slips. That's all they really are. They're permission slips to allow ourself to go into self-repair and self-healing, just to return to our natural state of self-repair and self-healing. So We can use fasting or use juice or use carnivore or use whatever's popular in the moment. But for the most part, and when I explain this to people, there's kind of like first there's resistance, and then it's like, well, wait a minute, that makes sense because that's downstream from the inner shift, right? So the most profound shift is a shift in consciousness, a shift in self awareness. And because of that shift, we make a shift or a change in actions. And then those actions have efficacy. Some have more efficacy than others. But without the inner shift, it doesn't really matter what we do. It doesn't really matter what we do. And I'll take it even further. We talk about permission slips. Really the frequency of certainty, of knowingness, of authenticity is the most powerful free. People talk about love and other. This is bullshit. That's a spiritual fiction, love, light, namaste. We're all going to 5D garbage, absolute garbage. It's certainty, it's complete alignment, it's authenticity. That's the power. If we are certain in what we are doing is going to affect our health in a very positive way, it will. If we're certain. If we doubt that whatever changes we're making in regards to our health or other things, not just health, if we doubt that what we're doing is going to elicit or engender transformation and change, we're right either way. If we doubt it, we'll get limited results. If we're certain, we will get powerful results. And this really speaks to the power of the self, or what people call the power of the mind. But we're really talking about the higher mind, not the lower consciousness of logic and linearity. It's certainty is really what does it. We don't heal through belief. Anyone who says we heal through belief, that is absolute proof that this is an unawakened mind. Beliefs, by definition, are disempowering. If we looked at and felt into what a belief by metaphysical definition is anything whose landing spot lies outside of the self, like I believe in a heaven out there. There is no out there. It doesn't exist, right? You do not heal, no one heals through belief. We heal through a very specific frequency of knowing or certainty. And that's the key. And that's why I say these things in a lot of ways are just permission slips. They really are. They do have efficacy. I'm not here stating that fasting doesn't have efficacy or juicing doesn't have, because it does. It does. But it's the certainty is the real power that elicits and can elicit total transformation and total healing, no matter what the current state or condition actually is. I hope you're enjoying this fantastic conversation. But don't worry, there is much, much more to this conversation. So if you're not subscribed, click on that, subscribe, and there'll be more of this interview coming very soon. Until then, be well.